that we can conduct a peaceful elections? Well, we've been able to do that, but just keep your thoughts coming in. We'll be sharing them at the end of this show. But right now, we're speaking with Ken Oko, and we're talking about this whole psychology of elections. Ken, thank you very much for joining us. A lot of us are finding ourselves in a state of buzz, and I could see a lot of tweets of people saying, I can't sleep, because for 5 days we've been, yes, and anxious about it. Okay, so let's understand the nature of elections and what our mindset is, you know, as a Kenyan people surrounding the elections first before we get into the details of it.
You know, this particular election was pretty wrapped up for Kenyans because everybody was so tense, you know, waiting for 2013. And having gone through what we did in 2007, 2008, you know, everybody was watching Kenya. So you can imagine the citizens are watching themselves and the whole world is watching us. And so we have to really like put up a show for everyone to appreciate. At the individual level, all of us had high hopes that this would go well and our lives would proceed the way it should. And then collectively, people started talking about it, sharing it. And I thought that was the best part of nationhood, because a lot of times we never really have a chance, you know, to have that nationhood moment where we are all together behind something or someone, unless there's a tragedy. But this time around, we were actually doing a transition and a celebration. So everybody was so wound up, you know, waiting to unwind with the results.
Springs, huh?
Everybody is, you know, really tense.
Right.
And that's why the 5 days were excruciating, because, you know, you're sitting there, I've cast my vote, and a lot of us did. And so you're waiting to see the outcome. And each one of us kept telling our brothers and sisters, whether it's you or me, it's okay. That was the beauty of this country at that time. The sense of nationhood usually seeps down to the individual psyche. You have a collective mind as a citizenry, and you say, this is what we're going to do as a people. But of course, within you, there are usually those elements who say, nah, if it doesn't go like this, we're going to do this, and, you know, blah, blah, fish cake. But I think the best part of it was the fact that Kenyans appear to be a very enlightened lot, and our minds were totally porous to any outcome, because everybody kept saying, whichever way it goes, let's work it out. Yeah, and I thought that was the best part of the collective psyche that we talk about.
But that being said, an election is obviously a process that makes us choose. I will choose for Ken Oko or any other candidate that has put himself up for whatever seat that is. And so at some point, we're sort of divided and we go into our camps, tribal or otherwise. But definitely we say, I'm supporting person X, you are supporting person Y. Do you think there's a bit of that division still in the air at the moment? There's a lot of people who are saying we're still supporting Raila Odinga. There's a lot of people saying we support Uhuru Kenyatta and we won and you lost and that sort of thing.
Yeah, you know, election and governance, they usually have a converse effect on the minds of people. On the one hand, they bring us together. You know, you have this solidarity thing first at your ethnic or at your group level, and you say all of us are supporting so-and-so, and you're so tightly knit together in that support for that so-and-so. But then as a people, you also have the total level of solidarity where everybody is bonding with the other and saying this is a process we are all participating in. So when you're on that queue, nobody knows who's going to vote for who, but all of you are saying we are doing this. Immediately after the queue dissipates and you all go on your own, then you cleavage again around each other. So in that way, then it helps us still be together. The other thing is that we perpetuate that beyond the outcome of the election, and we say we were with so-and-so, and people keep enjoying each other, like your side lost, our side won. So there's always the yes and no, you know, the pros and cons. The other thing that happens is that during elections, there's a lot of dichotomization of society, and people are divided into a thin line between two people, usually the principals or the major horses, like we're calling them. And so you find everybody on this side holding their fort and another group on the other side holding their fort. But when that is done, the idea is to shake hands, which is what Kenyans have learned to do after 2007. We never really learned it during independence, as a sense of nationhood had disappeared. Everybody withdrew into their ethnic and class cocoons. Yeah, but finally with this election, I think the beauty of it was that despite the dichotomy, everybody was reaching out to the other, and all the SMSs and the tweets that were running around were like, hey guys, take it easy, we're okay on this side. And the other guys are like, okay, you take care of us. And you know, a lot of that went on. And anytime there was some form of quote-unquote interference from external international media, you'd see the Kenyans react, regardless of who they were supporting.
And that was interesting, though, when you talk about it. international media took quite a beating amongst the Kenyan population that, and you were right, regardless of who we were supporting, it was somebody from outside coming to tell us A, how to conduct our elections, or B, that we would conduct it in a certain way that would lead to violence. That unprecedented, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, you know, the school prefect mentality that, that the Muzungu has over us, I think will also kind of take a bad beating after this, and it will have to dilute itself, because they saw the reactions of people. The first time, even before we went casting our votes, there was a CNN piece, you know, and everybody took to social media and said,
someone
nah,
tell CNN,
you know,
that was the
this
hashtag,
is not it.
yes.
You know, then there's this kid with flour all over his face and saying, you're ready for CNN, you know. So everybody was like, guys, leave us alone. We are okay. And I think that level of maturity kind of seeped through to the election day. And immediately after the election day, everybody was, your ears were out. Is there any trouble anywhere? Is there a problem anywhere? Then after that, of course, the results, and the international media was still watching, you know, doing all sorts of things. And when they come for press conferences, everybody's looking at them suspiciously. Like, guys, this is our country, you know. So
report this, do this the right way.
Do it the right
and
way.
I think there's also that drive on social media now, you know, about peace, and not just on social media, but I think there was heavy messaging of peace everywhere in the media, on radio, television, wherever it was you looked. And then to some point, there were some people who were saying, okay, yeah, enough with the peace messages. It became a bit
saturated.
Yes. But do you think then the converse would have then definitely led us to violence? If there was a lot of some very pointed statements and some statements that were a bit harsh and, you know, rhetoric, do you think the idea of just flooding the space with peace messages is what actually led us to being peaceful?
You know, the Kenyan media this time round, I think first class, you know, did a beautiful job, and I need to commend you guys for that, because a lot of times you'd of course find those elements who want to seep in a different kind of message. The corporate sector didn't do a good job. We had maybe, I think, Crown Paints, you know, saying vote for peace, you know, and that kind of thing. But they never did. The church came out twice and tried their best, but the rest of it was all on the citizenry. And I think that initiative that everybody took was the best part of this whole thing. If we had given a chance for people to just express themselves and say, this is what we want, we would have probably had a problem again. Because Kenya is so polarized in that ethnic and class system that you might never escape it, even if you really want to. But the fact that it was so overwhelming, you know, at the beginning, even if you were planning something stupid, you tell yourself, no, let me hold on, you know, because everybody was so out there saying, let's do this. And you know, the beauty of it is, like, just the other day, some of these guys met at Yaya Center. I don't know if you saw that piece, you know, TNA and CORD, and they all just mingled and said, guys, this is the way it goes. So with those kind of images, you know, coming through on our screens, then you'd probably be, you know, feeling really patriotic at that time. And I think that's the role of that exposure. The other thing about Kenyans is that for some reason, over the last 5-6 years, Kenyans have become extremely savvy, you know, in terms of technology, in terms of social media participation. And everybody is out there with an opinion. Whatever you say, people still listen to you. Some will hate you back, others will say, no, we are good. Yeah, and that exchange kind of tones down the temperatures. Because if it's not there and it remains bottled up, then during the election it starts, you know, getting out of people. And you find some guys on the street saying, no, we don't want this, we don't want that.
And it definitely finds another form of expression. So how do we now temper down? Because we're just... It's like this constant state of nobody can move forward, and a lot of people, obviously there's a lot of fatigue as well. And not just for the media, by the way. Everybody was awake for 5 days on end, just following that. And I think the hype's out, you know, with the presidential debates, and it went up to a crescendo. But how do we now debrief, de-stress?
There are things that are happening to the minds of Kenyans today. Everybody wakes up and sends each other a message. We read the newspapers and say all these things. I think the most important part is to watch our leaders as well. They need to take the initiative from now henceforth. I'm happy with what Uhuru Ruto and his team are trying to do, you know, from the first day. They're saying, guys, let's do this. We are all in this. We are doing this together. When your senator-elect was here earlier, you know, same story. You know, the political language needs to take precedence over whatever else we say. What matters the most is for us to go back to work, you know, get our things going, and regardless of court cases or whatever other mumblings and rumblings we may hear, I think Kenyans need to spectate, because you're right, everybody was really on the edge. And by the end of it all, believe you me, even if we had gone into that runoff, I doubt a lot of Kenyans would be interested. You know, most people were like, guy, this is too much. We've had enough. The campaigns were totally saturating.
Yes.
And finally the elections, after that, it takes us another whole week. You know, everybody just sitting there, nobody really getting to work. So if you ask me, the whole citizenry is really fatigued right now. And I think, I don't speak for anyone, but I think it would really be nice for the politicians to just shake hands and move on. Yeah, because a lot of times you might say it didn't go our way, but yeah, there's always you know, another opportunity. Sometimes you might think like there might be no other opportunity, but there's so many other ways you can serve your country. At the lower level, when you look at the guys who, the working class, their eagerness to get back to work, and everybody was like, guys, we need to get back to the office, we need to get back to our workplaces. I think that's where it begins, the healing. And from there on, you start, you know, reintegrating yourself as an individual back to life, take the kids back to school, go to work, come back in the evening, and, you know, be exhausted like you always were, not from spectating politics, but from building the nation.
Life. And where does that initiative come from? It comes from the political class, or does it come from us as Kenyans?
At this moment in time, the incumbent needs to say more. He has already said something. The guys who are, you know, waiting to come on, this is their period between now and the 26th. If nothing goes haywire and they are to be sworn in, they have that time to teach Kenyans that, guys, look at us like we are healing you and we are healing this country. And whatever message they've been sending across, I think is totally appropriate, that we are here for the whole country, even though the votes divided us in the middle, but we are here to work with all of us. And, you know, they've reached out to the other side and said, guys, come, let's do this together. So it is totally upon them at this time. The citizen will always follow. You know, at this time, people are still very hungry for news and looking for their direction from their leaders. So when they take over and the first thing they do, like go to church, I think Kenyans will like, okay, even us, let's go to church. Because that's how leadership works in the psyche of the individual. When you see your leader do something, if, for example, any one of us, of the leaders, took on to the media today and issued a statement and said this election was really bad and we're going to do this and that, you'll see some guys actually taking up that tempo and saying, yes, that's how it should be. But if, on the other hand, we have them coming into the media or holding press conferences and saying, no, let's move on. Then you see Kenyans also saying, yeah, anyway, let's do it. You know, that's where leadership comes in.
But a lot of people of the opinion now, and let's be open about this, CORD is not happy with the outcome, and they're going to court today. And we're getting a lot of this thing that there's people who might want to support that process, but feel fearful of saying that because the whole country is, let's move forward, let's move forward, let's move forward. And in saying let's move forward, a lot of other people are feeling disenfranchised, like you all are moving forward and we're not happy with certain things and we want to do that. And there's a tweet here, and I'll find it in just a moment, about one person saying that, you know what, it just seems like everyone's saying move on, but there's a section of certain Kenyans who say we're not happy. And I think they're sort of feeling, you know, a little, you know, be quiet and let's move on. And because of 2007, you know, if you're unhappy, don't say anything. Have we created that sort of scenario, do you think, where certain views are not being allowed to be heard?
That's the complicated part of this whole thing, Yvonne. When Raila Odinga went to that press conference, everybody was watching his body language and those people behind him. For some strange reason, his usual suspects were not there. He was with, you know, these ordinary-looking Kenyans, and maybe he was sending a message, maybe it was by default. But, you know, thereafter, everybody is like, okay, so where are they going? Because everybody is watching the moves of where are we moving on from here. So when you see the president-elect and the deputy president-elect, you know, receiving a lot of attention and very little attention being given to the CORD rumblings, then definitely what you're saying is true, because a lot of Kenyans at this moment in time are totally, you know, unhappy about the outcome of the election. But it's not a sense of disenfranchisement as such. It is a sense of Kenyans saying we need a break from all this. Yeah, because one of the outcomes which people are already thinking of is if the court reversed the process, then it's like we are taken back 3 months.
But shouldn't we still allow these individuals to say they're unhappy?
The legislature
despite the fact that we are, you know, everyone wants to move on and we're tired of the election, but it sort of seems like a larger number of the population is stifling the voice of the others that are unhappy.
Yeah, but a lot of times, Yvonne, you know, if you look at society, even family at home, you know, we go with the majority. When the majority, even at home, we say, today we want to do ugali, you know, then mama will make ugali because everybody wants ugali. And the other thing that's happening right now is that if I were on the other side today to give them advice, CORD, I would tell them, please proceed with the court process, but the idea is don't politicize it, because then Kenyans are a little, like, right now, withdrawn, if you ask me. And on the 5th day, after that Friday night and everybody broke out on Saturday morning, you could realize a sense of relief. Not because Uhuru has won, but because of the end of the process.
Over.
Yeah,
Right. Okay.
and that's the sense we are looking at at this moment, because we are saying, fine, you want to go to court, the courts are there for all of us. And luckily, the Prime Minister outgoing said the courts are now trustworthy. So let the legislature also play their role, and if they so wish, advise the Kenyan citizenry that this is how it works for us. Yeah, but you're right, there's always that side of the divide that is saying, this is not good, we need to move on from here and there. Yeah, but then a lot of Kenyans, surprisingly, at this moment, are also concerned about our international image, not just our own peace here. So guys are saying, no, guys, let this be, let's just move on. So I know they might feel a little disadvantaged, but that's the way of the world. That's how the world works. Nobody is happy all the time. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Talking about the discussion that we're having, and we will continue to display the tweets which are regarding our question of the day today. We're asking you your reflections of the just concluded elections, and those are the tweets that we will carry on showing live on air, even as we talk about the psychology surrounding this process. So keep your tweets coming in at KTN Kenya. You can tweet me at Yvonne Okwara, and your comments via SMS 8040. Keep them coming in, and we will share them in the course of our discussion for now. And we take elections seriously and personally, and perhaps rightfully so, because the election is this individual that will represent me at this level, and what I stand to gain. But do you think sometimes we take it a little too seriously and it's very personal? Tell you what, there's a story in the press today about a 71-year-old lady who collapsed and died.
Yes, during the voting
now,
process.
I am not a doctor, so I cannot say confidently that it was directly because of her waiting for the elections. But they did say she was so anxious about it. And when she saw the gap between Uhuru and Raila, because it kept happening, the gap widened and then came a little closer. And she said, just before she collapsed and died, she said, I am so worried that, the gap is closing and the candidate that I'm supporting could end up losing this. And then she collapsed and died. It's a sad death, to say the least.
True.
Perhaps talking about how seriously we take this. Ken, what are your thoughts on
over
that?
the weekend, in one particular church, they mentioned the lady, prayed out for her. And one of the things they said is that she represented the face of sacrifice. And whenever we do anything, it's not just the elections, anything you want to do in life, you will have to, apportion a certain amount of sacrifice. That lady, being in her advanced age, represented that for this country at this time. Earlier on, a few months ago, you remember when the Mugumo tree fell and all the central province guys were saying all
Yes,
these things.
right.
And everybody said, oh God, this is going to happen, this is not
Yes.
going to happen. That's basically what happens in life. The thing that you mentioned there about us internalizing the process, I think that's a problem we have in Kenya. We did everything so well, apart from taking this personally. Because you'd sit sometimes at home with your spouse or with your friends. And the other side, the beauty of it is that you'd find a home where the wife is saying, I am pro whoever, and the hubby is saying, I'm pro whoever. But they still talk about it over dinner. And sometimes when it gets really personal, then you say, hush, kill that story right there, because we don't want to go that far.
Yeah.
I think that was the mistake we made. We internalized this thing too much. And when we were doing our campaigns and talking about the candidates, every evening if you drove through the CBD, you'd find clogs and clogs of people, agitating,
Yes.
talking about politics
Yes.
until 9 in the night.
Right.
And you're thinking, gosh, you guys, there's other things you could do with life.
Yes, indeed.
That's where we need to go now. What usually happens is when you lose a life, or when you lose an election, or when you lose anything, there's that sense of disappointment, and everybody's like, gosh, I wish it went the other way. But how many times in life do we say that and we pick up and we move on?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think for this country, when the announcement was made and you could see everybody like muted or joyous, either way you're like, okay, these are two sides of the country.
Okay.
I liked what the media did again and go to the usual sports, Kisumu, Kibera, and come and show us guys are quiet. Yeah, and all the Kenyans are saying, yenyewe, that's the way we need to go.
Okay.
And when you take that stand, then definitely the new leadership also gets an inspiration from it. The legislature is usually a bit rigid because they look at the facts and the figures, and they look at the process in terms of legality, and they will say this is our decision without thinking of today or tomorrow. Somebody made a comment on social media about the difference between 6 billion shillings and these elections. You know, when you talk about 8,000 votes,
Yes.
and somebody's like, can't we just bag them from somewhere and keep that money for other purposes?
Alright.
You know, but that's a muted kind of
Yes.
thought, and everybody is thinking it's not just the money.
Yeah.
It is the effort, it is the participation, and then grinding to a halt again a month later for another week maybe, or 3 days, and saying we're waiting again for results. We look stagnating, and we look like we are, you know, being whirlpooled into one place.
Right.
Yeah.
When we talk about that, you know, there's that personalization of it, and we even saw the celebrations. And I did say when we saw some of that footage that, you know, be careful how you celebrate. People were hanging out of vehicles, and indeed an accident did take place in central Kenya, you know, with a lorry, you know, tipping over.
Yeah.
But that's just talking about how we personalize it, and we're so excited, and we get back to work. But the feeling has been that regardless of how we've come out of this, who's won, whether I supported him or her or not, but that Kenya will never be the same again.
True.
I think a lot was learned from 2007. In what ways have we changed fundamentally, so differently, this time going forward?
You know, when people get scarred, again at the individual or collective level, your mind remains fixated on what caused the scar. And I think in 2007, whether you were directly or indirectly affected, any one of us, we had that scar somewhere, and you'd say, no, I'm not doing this again. And so a lot of people, you know, surprising, the ones we are not mentioning, other than the spoiled votes, the abstainers, the guys who refused to go and vote, they reluctantly went and registered, but then they kept saying, nah, I'm staying at home. And so a lot of people, what, about 2 million Kenyans didn't vote, and they just said, nah, I'm not going to do it. There's that lot of people who probably, you know, having internalized this thing, said, I got a problem, my relative, this happened to her, this happened to him, and so they refused to move on. The other thing that has happened is that there's a generational shift in this country, not just with the leadership, even though we've seen it there, but I think Ruto and Uhuru kind of sensed that, and they started preaching this message that, you know, let the younger people do their thing. Because in 2007, it was the young people who were out on the streets, not the wazees. So the younger people were like being roped in and said, let's be part of this process and let's own it. And once they do, they feel a sense of, you know, collective responsibility. And I think that was the cleverest part of the Uhuru Ruto campaign, because they even though sometimes they would get a bit derogatory, you know, about the older people, but the thing is the younger people are beginning to identify and say, this thing is ours, we own it. And so when they go out and vote and then they win the election, if you're assuming a lot of young people voted on the other side, the sense of ownership and entitlement restrains them from doing anything stupid. And you know, when you have younger people, again, if you looked at the media, even in the leadership ranks, a lot of young people came in.
The 19-year-olds,
yes, you know,
that we've seen, yes.
Even our senator-elect who just
right.
left, you know, all these guys who have still got this vision and saying, guys, we are in now, let's do this together. I think that's one of the biggest things that happened in this country. The other one is that Kenyans have become averse to trouble. Yeah, between these 5 years,
yes.
totally, you know, and even the sense of mob justice and, you know, screaming all over the street totally disappeared.
Yes.
Yeah, and Kenyans are saying, guys, let's tone this down, and I think that's a beautiful thing that happened to us.
Have we achieved national healing, though? You know, complete? Are we where we want to be with national healing? Like you mentioned, we all have a scar of what happened. Each and every one of us has a story to tell, whether we're directly or directly affected. But have we achieved national healing, or are we sweeping it under the rug and saying, see, look, we've come out, we've done an election, we were peaceful. Are there a lot of unresolved issues that we need to tackle?
If I may first take the global perspective, if you, regardless of the ICC cases and what they portend for us, once you bring two fighters together, like even at the individual level, you tell them, guys, you hold hands, lift them up. And then that is what happened with the Kalenjin and the Kikuyu bit. And when that happened and they came together, everybody was saying, is this for convenience, or are you just hoodwinking us and whatever? But once they emerge victorious and they say, we are two communities, we are now together, we are the ones who are really affected by this the most. What I would love the most today, Yvonne, is to see from the whole of this week different press conferences from different parts of the country. You know, not just with the leaders, but, you know, civil society, everybody saying, we are doing this together. The healing thing starts from us as individuals. The leaders will pick it up from there. And when you meet someone on the road, and you say, I had a problem with your mother, I had a problem with your daddy the other time, but I've forgiven you. That's how it works. And that's where the church now comes in, because that's what religion does to us. Anytime, however evil you are, once you go beyond, before the Almighty, there's always that sense of humility, and you come down and tone down.
Again, a lot of people would say that's very simplistic. We see people holding hands, religion, and we know about religion and the euphoria that, it can carry. You get into church and sometimes you feel that fire, the Holy Ghost fire. You feel very emotional and carried away with the moment.
But soon after.
It's soon after, you know where I'm headed with that one. And not to knock too hard on the churches, because we did have that repentance rally by Prophet Towor, and we had that. But is it just that simple, really? Do we just see Ruto and Uhuru coming together and we say, okay, fine, that's done? Are we sure that the Kikuyu and the Kalenjin and all the other communities
down there
on the ground have really achieved national healing? A lot of people would say there's no peace without justice.
The thing with politics is that it tends to represent. Yeah, so even the guy who didn't vote, even the guy who didn't vote for you, or the one who didn't go to vote at all, once some universal or global perspective comes out of your politics, the guy will feel inclined to either support or just be, along the sphere. What has happened is that when you look at healing, it's usually a very gradual process. I am so afraid to say that the outgoing government, the incumbent, didn't do a good job with the IDPs, because that's where the healing would have started. You reintegrate these guys into the community and you tell them, we are sorry for what happened, here's some land either back where you are or somewhere near there, without taking the guy another million miles away from where he used to live. And I am thinking, if the political class today has decided to take that mantle of reintegration and say, the IDPs, their story is finished, they're all happy, they hold their press conference and they tell us, guys, we voted or we didn't vote, but we are happy now. Once people feel that vibe, then it will work. But you're right, if you're looking at it from the political angle, there's a lot of window dressing and showcasing, and they'll tell you, now we are good. But that's never true, because down there, there's still one guy who says, my land, what happened?
Right.
So I think when it comes to those basic emotive issues, the civil society at this moment in time, onus is on them, ball in their court. This is the time they need to go out, point out to us the hotspots, tell us what the problem is, and then come back to the leadership and say, guys, you thought you won the elections and you thought everybody was happy, but no. Down in Elgeyo Marakwet or down in Kiambu, there's some guy who's still really grumbling. So that way then we will achieve it. If we go around this country, the Land Commission is supposed to have done that. Yeah, but sometimes again it's restricted to the landowners. What happens to the guys who are just pushed aside and told, you used to live here, but now you're not here anymore?
All right, so what should be our mentality? Because everybody's saying, even on Twitter and social media, get back to work, get back to work, get back to work. Is it really normalization
is what we should internalize right now. Because when you sit back somewhere, everybody's calling you and they ask you, where are you? I'm at home. What are you doing at home? I'm waiting for results. And you're supposed to be in the office. So first we normalize our lives, get back to our routines. But the best part of it, again, I'm so happy Kenyans are so active on the social media. The best part of it is exploit all those channels and opportunities. And normalizing life is not usually just saying the elections are overdone, even though some guys are still grumbling. No, it is about picking up and saying we erred here, we made a mistake here, let's move on and let's heal, let's do this afresh. I think the critical question right now for the new leadership is, how do you sew up? There's this song that says, bring me back stitch by stitch. You need to do it, pole pole. You can't just wake up and say, now we have won, we're all good. No, you're totally right about that. You will not have healed anyone. You need to go down there and tell guys, I'm mandating you to cover this region for me and tell me what the problem is.
So
it's
also in solving the problems for everybody. That's one thing.
The success of the Truth and Justice Commission, the Bishop Tutu led one,
right.
They literally combed out South Africa. South Africa was a totally polarized nation, very xenophobic. Anything they see that's new, they're like, no, we don't want. And they walked through it. And that was, like everybody says, their Mandela moment. Mandela, you know, kind of then came and stitched them together, bit by bit. I think one of the things that Uhuru and Ruto would need to learn is how to do that. And if they can't do it, delegate. You know, do it with the guys. The beauty of devolution is that when you look at county by county, it's so easy for you to say, okay, this county, what are you unhappy about? We sort you out. This county, and there are only 47, we're not so many, you know, so you can have it done. And that healing process also, I think, if you look at the theme of what you're talking about today, it has to come from here. Okay. It's totally in the psyche of the individual. Once you realize that I can do this, I can wake up and dust myself up, do that with your neighbor as well. And if they're still making noise about something, have a discussion about it. Don't go fisticuff.
Or try to
shut
make
them
it,
up.
yes,
And, yeah,
like what they're talking about doesn't make sense. Before I let you go, we talked about the divide, and for some it may have been tribal, but there was the class issue that came up in this election, and particularly in Nairobi when it came to who were going to choose for governor. And this middle class that has always been apathetic to the election suddenly stepped up to the plate, and they had been accused as well of just sitting back and making all this, yes, making all these comments saying, oh, elections is not for the middle class or the working people, it's for those other ones who have nothing better to do with their lives. I mean, the class issue really came up as a discussion in this election. Tell us about that, and of course the reawakening of the middle class in terms of getting involved.
When we're in class, the sociology and psychology, we tell people that we each belong to a class by choice. A lot of times it's by circumstance, but we try to tell you that it's by choice. The one which is most influenced by choice is the middle class, because sometimes you've not really reached the trappings of middle class, but you feel like you want to. And so you do it and say, okay, I'm going to move, I want to start living in Lavington, I'm going to drive this kind of car, and you already ascribe to the middle class. Once that happens, then your behavior also changes. Sometimes you see the guys walking to the queue and saying, we are going to line up, and you say, nah, I can't do that, I'll sit at home and wait for evening, then before you realize it's past 5 and you don't vote. But this time around, I think that's what I was talking about earlier, the activity of Kenyans and the sensitivity of Kenyans, especially on social media. The middle class was pricked into a conscience. And everybody was talking about them and saying, see what you did to Nairobi. Mbaru, Kidero, and
Waititu, yes.
And when you looked at the social media, Mbaru was so far ahead, because the middle class was thinking this is the kind of guy. So it was the war between Mbaru and Kidero. And eventually Mbaru just fizzled out because the middle class never did anything about it. And I think that was a turning point for the middle class. These are guys who are very transient, they're very transitional, and a lot of times they're totally liquid. They really don't know what to do with themselves, other than go out and have fun and come back home and retreat. But I'm so happy. That's one of the things I think if you talk about what changed, the middle class got reactivated. And with that, we kind of joined hands, with the working class, and then the elite are also thinking, okay, so all of us are in this together. That was the beauty of this election.
It was a realization that politics affects everybody.
Yes.
Middle class,
and
elites.
your choices.
Yes.
Yeah, you remember that statement by Johnny
Choices
Carson,
and
which
consequences. Right.
So the middle class was like, okay, fine, if we don't vote, we might suffer the consequences more than anyone else. Because the guy who walks to work to industrial area, he is very avid about his elections and his politics. But he realized he never really benefits, he never really sees a change in his life, but he's the guy who participates the most. So the middle class is thinking, no, this is not fair. And Kenyans are telling us, most likely, I'm the one who might get appointed somewhere, who might do business with these guys, so we need to go out and vote. And I thought that was the beauty of this election. We really got them onto their toes. And they lined up and queued and voted.
Indeed. And still staying with that middle class and that sort of population on Twitter and on social media, of course, the big surprise was the fact that, in taking cognizance of the fact that there's a middle class population and a heavy one that needed to be addressed in the issues, a lot of presidential candidates went heavy on social media and pushed the message a lot. And of course, they also went out and campaigned with the others who might not necessarily be on Twitter. But boy, were they disappointed by their Twitter supporters. Getting to the point where, are we insincere as Kenyans? I mean, we say nitasimama na mama, and we tell Peter Kenneth, I will vote for you, and yet the number of likes on his Facebook page, the number of followers on their Twitter pages didn't translate into the votes. But let's put in a rider here that, of course, a lot of the people that were following them on Twitter were not necessarily registered voters in Kenya. They could have been from the diaspora, and we recognize that. But do you think Kenyans are, insincere? Because even when we had Kiapi here and we're talking about the opinion polls, he said the opinion polls, he trashed them, and he said, I know because the people I'm speaking with on the ground have told me they will vote for me. And telling you that they will vote for you is one thing, and actually voting is another. Do you think when it comes to elections, we tell everybody,
in this country,
Uhuru Kenyatta will vote for you, Raila Odinga will vote for you,
there's a lot of lip service in this country, and I know that, especially when you look at, like, you go social, you're thinking of spectatorship, like for sports, the teams that we support locally and internationally. You'll see Kenyans looking so active, like, I am part of this. But then sometimes you realize, he's just doing it because the crowd is with that at the moment. When he retreats, he's supporting somebody else. The thing with politics and commitment is that our leaders need to learn what happened to them this time, especially someone like Peter Kenneth. He looked very attuned. He looked very with it,
Yes.
you know, and I think if he relied on what he could see, especially after his manifesto presentation, he would have thought either number 2 or number 1 for himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that never took him anywhere, and it never went down the drain. It never went down with what he had planned. Now, what usually happens with us is that Kenyans are very verbose. We talk a lot, and that's, I think, I don't know whether that's a beautiful thing or a bad thing. We really talk.
Depending on how you look at it,
And you
yes.
find guys just like in Mombasa, they can
Yes.
sit there like for 3 hours just
Yeah.
discussing one thing.
Right.
And Kenyans will have an opinion on everything.
True.
And sometimes it messes us up. But when we go back to our individual self, people will profess, I'm beyond the tribal barrier, I'm
Right.
beyond the class structure. But when he goes down to the roots, it's the same old guy. That's one of the difficult things that, you know, in this country, as a leader, you would have to really read through. And you cannot then blame the politicians for retreating to their their ethnic cocoons, because they understand
They
the
know it
psyche of
works.
Kenyans.
Yes.
They know it works.
Right.
So even though everybody is saying, no, we're going to do this nationally, we're going to treat everybody right, but they keep concentrating on their own people. And so when the election results come out, everybody is hitting at Mutai Ngunya and saying, how can you talk about tyranny of numbers, you
And
know?
now it turns out
but then
he
it
was
turns out
right.
that he was right, you know,
Okay.
and even the figures he was mentioning, 6 million, they
Yes.
came to pass.
Right.
And so sometimes then you hit him so hard, and that's the problem with Kenyans. Everybody poured their vitriol on him.
Yes.
And then when the results come out, even yesterday in the newspaper, somebody's already said, oh, he had a point, you know. But if you look at it, that point was totally ethnic. And Mutai Ngunya being the guy
Yeah.
he is.
And he was telling us who we really were.
Really, yes.
Okay.
He was just exposing our belly bottom. You know, so,
All right,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And we were not happy with that. Thank you very much
Carry this on.
for your time this morning, just analyzing that and reminding us that getting back to work is up here, and it starts with us. And of course, the leaders showing that sign of unity would definitely help, but it's all about us and analyzing our election psychology and how we get to that point. We've come to the end now, but I would like to take a look at some of your views. They have been showing live on air, and that's what we do. So anytime you send us a tweet, we do like to air it live. So the question we'd asked you was to give us your reflections on this just concluded elections. Let's start with a few. You say, Amos Chacha, you say a silent nation doesn't necessarily reflect a peaceful nation. All right, point noted. Gitonga, George and Mary, you say work, work, work and more work. Michael, you say Kenyans are satisfied with the results. It's only the greedy leaders who continue to destroy us. Anthony Bishops, you say Kenya should be a living example to the international community. Let's also take a look at other tweets that are coming in. Some good ones for Kipchumba Murkomen, the senator-elect for Elgeyo Marakwet, who joined us earlier. Peter Rutichu say you look very composed, Senator. I'm looking forward to working with you and the people of Elgeyo Marakwet. Peter, you say no matter what the outcome of this election had been, not everyone would be happy. This is true. And also, Andrew Chema, of course, on that Obama statement, you say the peaceful election just shows that the Kenyan star is more brighter than the Syrian bombs. Obama should know. Okay, some interesting ones there. There's also another one, and I'm trying to find that tweet right now. And it was from a lady. I'm sorry if I don't remember. It's so many tweets coming in. But you have an interesting take on this whole statement that was made by Obama. And okay, I can't find it right now, but it's words to the effect. You said that it was the media that made this statement a little worse and that probably blew it out of proportion. That's your view and you're entitled to it. I really wanted to make sure that I got that tweet in, and I will find that. So thank you for all your feedback. Oh, Pascal, you say thanks for the explanation. I'm watching you from Paraguay, South America. www.ktnkenya.tv. And a lot of responses coming in for this Obama statement. This is what the question that I asked. What are your thoughts on that statement? Not trying to influence that in one way or another. And then I have posted that on Twitter as well. You read it, you take a look at it for yourself and make that judgment on what it is. But of course, a lot of Kenyans entitled to that view. Brian Okello saying it was just silly banter that we made a fuss over, because the nature of that gridiron speech is usually, you know, a little humorous, and it's with the fourth estate, but a lot of people obviously not finding that joke very funny. Danny Gisheru saying, surely you can't compare Kenya and Syria. That's unheard of. Syria is in a civil war. So those are your tweets coming in and your SMSs as well. Quite a number of them. Thank you so much for your feedback. Thank you for engaging with us on our conversations now as we attempt to move the country forward and of course not not to diminish the fact that those who are unhappy with the election have a right to seek legal redress, and we will continue to report about that. But we also do remember that Kenya needs to move forward, and we will carry on with that discussion that we're having here. Thank you so much for joining us. I thank my guests, Kipchumba Murkomen, Ken Oko, for joining us, and of course as well, Martin Mutua, who's our editor at The Standard. This has been Sunrise Live. We're getting back to normal. Sunrise Live continues as always. I hope you are continuing with work and getting back into the groove of things. Do let me know how that's going, and keep it going, keep it moving, keep walking, keep moving forward. That is our message to you on Sunrise Live. Have a great one. My name is Yvonne Okwara. Again, we'll see you tomorrow. Kama kawaida. Have a good day. Bye-bye.